"Wait at the back," the senior flight attendant said, loud enough for phones to tilt and faces to turn. The command landed like a slap in a cabin, still smelling faintly of coffee. A dozen phones came up as if on cue. A woman in a plain coat holding a garment bag looked past the rows of seated strangers. Her jaw tightened, her hands did not shake. Around her the hum of air conditioning and small talk became thin and jagged, threaded with the buzz of recording. She did not answer. She did not raise her voice. She stepped away from the aisle with the quiet precision of someone who knows how to move when watching eyes are on her. That restraint made the moment sharper. People leaned forward to watch the rest of the story unfold. The garment bag brushed the overhead as she slipped into the galley and then into the lavatory. Behind the locked door, the world narrowed to a fluorescent square, and the small, exact work of undoing what she had been given. Civilian clothes folded back into the bag, the white shirt unfolded, the jacket smoothed over the sink, the hat set upon the counter. Each motion was economical. Each stripe she pulled through the sleeve caught the light, 4 bars of gold that belonged to someone who had spent years in briefings, in check rides, in weather and weight calculations, and stern late-night cross-checks. Her bun settled at the nape of her neck. She buttoned the jacket with a click that felt louder than it was. She did not rehearse a comeback. She prepared to do her job. When she returned, the cabin took her in, as if being introduced to a new fact. The hum dropped away, phones stilled in mid-recording. The senior flight attendant who had spoken, Diane Patterson, paused in the aisle with a cart in hand. Her smile faltered. The suited men near the front who had been trading low chuckles let their posture slacken. The pilot's epaulets caught the fluorescent light in a way that changed the room. "I'm Captain Taylor," she said, calm and precise. "I'll be commanding this flight." That was all. No flourish, no lecture. The name, the title, the 4 stripes were authority made visible, and it rearranged the room. A few people shifted in their seats as if a different gravity had settled over them. Diane's face moved through several shades, surprise, confusion, an instinct to explain that stopped halfway. On board, murmurs softened into attention. The cabin crew straightened in their own professional reflexes. In the cockpit, the mood was different but no less charged. Bradley Thompson, the first officer who'd been scheduled for the leg, touched the interphone and said the obvious. "Captain, operations just pinged. There's pressure sensor chatter on that middle probe." Taylor thanked him and took in the timeline. She listened to the crisp, thin voice of William Hayes, the operations manager, when he came on the line, practical, impatient. "We have executives on board," he said. "We need to minimize delays. Can we get this sorted quickly?" There were other pressures available that day besides weather and schedule. A cluster of executives in the cabin, suits, schedules, connecting flights, shifted like a small chorus. They exchanged looks that measured inconvenience with a trader's efficiency. Diane, who had moments before been comfortable issuing orders from a seat of assumed authority, now hovered half in the aisle, half in the memory of what she'd said. Her whispers threaded into the hum of anxiety, pushing the narrative that the alert might be a false positive, that they should press on for the sake of time. Taylor kept her voice even. She had a checklist in her head and a duty that belonged to the airplane and everyone inside it. She ran through what she knew. The sensor had shown a discrepancy. It was the sort of thing that could be a maintenance hiccup, or it could be the beginning of a more serious issue. Aviation gives you stark choices: proceed and assume, or pause and verify. People trust pilots with those choices, trust that is often quiet until it's tested. "We'll wait for a full inspection," she said. You could hear the pressure spool up in the cockpit. Bradley leaned forward. "If maintenance has to pull the probe, we could be delayed an hour, maybe more," he said. "We've got a window." Hayes's voice tightened. "Captain, is this necessary? These are important clients. We need this leg to move." Taylor's eyes moved to the cabin briefly, to the group of passengers who had just watched her reclaim her place. She thought of the woman in the plain coat. The same hands that had folded into the garment bag had steadied the controls of a jet many times over. No one aboard that day had a guarantee. Their safety depended on someone willing to make an unpopular decision. "We wait," she said again, softer, final. Safety first. The line between a professional decision and a personal vindication never blurred for her. This was not about proving Diane wrong. It was about not gambling with the people who had trusted the airline to carry them. Still, the context could not be denied. She had been publicly diminished minutes earlier, then returned in uniform and title. Now those two moments, humiliation and authority, stood on either side of the same choice. Maintenance arrived, methodical and neutral, with a portable diagnostic kit and careful faces. They cleared the cabin for a short delay, checked the system logs, ran tests, and then one of the technicians tapped a tablet and said words so small they sounded huge in the quiet. "We found a failure in the pressure regulation sensor. It's not functioning within tolerance." Words like failure in aviation are precise, not theatrical. The technician explained that if the anomaly had gone unnoticed and the aircraft had climbed to cruising altitude without a functioning compensation, there would have been a credible risk of loss of cabin pressurization, a hazard the maintenance team described in clinical terms that nevertheless carried weight, a potential for catastrophic decompression at altitude. They stressed what pilots and engineers always stress: conditional language, probabilities and mitigations, no dramatic certainties. The point was not to narrate a horror, but to confirm. They were standing in front of a problem that could have been much worse. Inside the cabin, expressions changed in stages. The suited men put down their phones. Diane's face, which had been animated with earlier authority, flattened into something quieter and more private. Some passengers murmured, the sound of relief threaded with a new awareness. A woman in the middle rows, who had been watching the scene unfold and recording it, closed her phone and stared at the stripes on Captain Taylor's shoulders as if the metal itself had just acquired meaning. William Hayes walked the aisle with the neutral professionalism the moment demanded. He did not cheer. He did not issue a public apology in loud tones. He spoke to Taylor in a voice that acknowledged the chain of decisions that had led to safety. "Good call, Captain," he said, and the words were modest but sufficient. They signaled corporate acceptance of the choice that put safety ahead of schedule. No one in the cabin sought public retribution. The shift was quiet and practical. Passengers rearranged their plans. The airline offered rebookings and accommodations. The executives accepted the delay with a new patience that felt bordered by humility. Diane, who had earlier directed a command from an assumed authority, returned to her seat with her gestures smaller, her cart pushed along with a careful gait. She would later explain, perhaps, that she had been doing her job, her role in the cabin, but the scene had already done its work. The spectacle of public humiliation had been replaced by the spectacle of professional competence. Captain Taylor taxied out later, the engines a steady vow under the wings. She addressed the cabin, not to gloat, but to close the moment and the duty. A succinct explanation, a few words of reassurance, and then the business-like cadence of a pilot getting on with the flight. Her voice carried calm, the kind that has been earned by hours spent in bad weather and in careful systems checks. The plane lifted into a low, clouded sky, steady as someone who knows the terrain and has chosen the safe line. The story could have been reduced to a single neat reversal. The woman mocked, the woman revealed. But the truth was shaped by decisions, by protocol, by the maintenance confirmation that turned a social embarrassment into a professional vindication. That vindication did not humiliate anyone further. It restored an equilibrium that had been breached by assumption. In the days after, videos of the encounter circulated, as these things do. Phones had recorded the quick arc, the command, the walk to the lavatory, the return, the stripes, the announcement. People debated what they'd seen in comment threads and quiet conversations. Some focused on the sting of the original moment, on how quickly assumptions are made. Some focused on the competence that followed. Most settled somewhere in between, recognizing how small public acts can carry consequences far beyond the immediate humiliation. What remained with those on board was the practical lesson that authority and responsibility are not the same thing. A title spoken loudly in an empty moment is not the same as the steady, sometimes lonely work it takes to keep a plane and its people safe. Captain Taylor's choice was not a demonstration against Diane. It was a demonstration for everyone who trusts a uniform and the training behind it. If this matters to you, tap like. When the jet climbed and the ground slid away, the cabin exhaled. People resumed their private worlds, emails, naps, the small domestic dramas of travel, but the memory of the stripes and the decision lingered. It was not the theatrical revenge some would have wanted. It was quieter, a professional insistence that, in the end, kept the airplane on a safer course. Share this story if you believe competence should speak louder than assumptions, and subscribe for more true moments where quiet integrity meets public scrutiny.